And I was really impressed with, for example, the improved AI acceleration capabilities. It's showing it's a great alternative to GPUs as part of this and other kind of dedicated accelerators as well. So I was really impressed to see that.
That was tech expert Dr. Sally Eaves. And I'm Kenton Williston, the editor-in-chief of Insight.Tech. Every episode on the IoT Chat, I talk to industry experts about the technology and business trends that matter for developers, systems integrators, and end users. Today I'm joined not only by Sally, but also by Yazz Krzalic, the Director of Marketing and Business Development at Trenton Systems. We're going to take a close look at the new third-generation Intel Xeon Scalable processor, formerly known as Ice Lake, as well as some of the surprising ways Intel is changing and what all of this means for the IoT space. I got to live tweet the launch of the new chips with Sally a couple of weeks ago, and I was pretty impressed with what I saw. I can't wait to dive deeper into Ice Lake, but first let me introduce our guests. So Yazz, welcome to the show.
Hi Kenton, thanks for having me on the show today.
Absolutely. So what does Trenton Systems do?
Sure. Trenton Systems makes trusted cybersecure made in USA high performance computing solutions. And that's across the industrial, military, and commercial sectors. So our systems support critical IT infrastructures around the globe. And we help reduce latency, provide real-time insights at the edge, while also securing sensitive and confidential information. So in essence, if a use case requires lots of computing power, needs to operate around the clock in real time, needs to keep sensitive data encrypted or protected, and that's in a climate control or harsh environment, our trusted computing solutions answer that call of duty.
Great. Well, I look forward to learning more about that. But before we get into that, Sally, welcome to you as well.
Thank you, Kenton. Lovely to be with you.
I'm happy to have you here. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm a chief technology officer by background. I now mostly do advisory around emergent technology subjects. So across cloud, cybersecurity, IoT, 5G, AI, and blockchain. I'm also passionate about tech as a force for good. So I have a nonprofit called Aspirational Futures that's very much around kind of inclusion and diversity in tech and really building that out. So as well as tech change, I also look at the aspects of culture, skills, sustainability, and social impact that can underpin that too. And I'm also an author, very active online building community around these subjects.
Yes. And speaking of being active online, like I said, we got to live tweet the launch together, which was really cool. So I want to start there by talking about that launch event. What was your biggest takeaway from that event?
Absolutely. And you're spot on there in terms of the event live tweeting. It was a really action-packed launch. I think one of the best event presentations I've seen in some time, to be honest. It was brilliant. A lot of superb content. I love the fact there were many real-world tangible examples in there and research that was underpinning things. So such a lot to share. I think for me, it's hard to pick one area because I really came up with four that came to the fore for me. So built-in security, embedded AI, network optimization, but also tech as a force for good. So I think if I have to pick one that came to the fore and brought these things together, I'd actually focus on that because before anything was mentioned around the amazing advancements in processor innovation, the event actually started with a focus on community. And the keynote was really asking the question, what's your why? So I was super impressed to see that taking center stage. There were initiatives such as Intel Rise that was spoken about, $20 million for social impact projects. So for me, that's a great example of shared value and an impressive statement on tech leadership and really listening to what people are really wanting to see from technology organizations. So I thought I'd flag that because I think that was a really, really impressive thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with that. Saw many of the same things as you did, and certainly not the least of those was huge emphasis on AI. I think certainly from the IoT perspective, that was one of the things that really stood out to me. A huge, huge emphasis on how much additional AI performance are in this new Ice Lake chips compared to previous generations. And I'm curious what you think about, why did Intel have such an emphasis on AI and what this says about the way computing is evolving?
Yeah, I think for me, it reflects that AI is one of the fastest growing workloads out there at the moment. And I was really impressed with, for example, the improved AI acceleration capabilities. It's showing it's a great alternative to GPUs as part of this and other kind of dedicated accelerators as well. So I was really impressed to see that. I think something else that came to the fore for me was the fact that this is bringing together inferencing capabilities across simulation and also data analytic workloads. I don't think that gets enough attention sometimes. I think we sometimes look at AI only in attention of analytics, but this is simulation aspect is incredibly important for AI as well. Data intensive simulation is so huge. So I was really impressed to see that. I think that's going to be so important to emerging use cases. For me, the other thing that came to the fore was the Intel DL Boost facility. Again, this AI acceleration is so important for areas, for example, around 3D, for gaming, for different use cases that are coming to the fore as we see this confluence really across different tech trends. So this focus on AI had to be at the fore. So I was really impressed to see that. And maybe beyond that as well. I've talked a lot recently around data waste and model waste. And I think some of the advancements here are really going to support things around AI ops and model ops approaches as well. We've already seen examples where data scientists are using the new processor to help build out and deploy increasingly smarter models and then improving that rate to go from POC to production. So really impressive to see that. And it's showing how we need these specific features and how important they are to have them for specific workloads too.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you mentioned the modeling aspect, and I'm wondering what you're thinking about there. So what comes to mind for me are things like genomics, things like if you're an auto manufacturer, being able to model parts. Are those the sort of things you have in mind? And just curious what stuck out to you and why that really drew your attention.
Absolutely. That's certainly one of the areas that comes to mind. I mean, I was speaking with a leader in the NHS only this morning, actually, which I think would be quite relevant. He's like head of information at one of the leading innovation centres for healthcare in the UK. And he was talking about the experience that they're having with their typical data sets. They're historical, typically stable, but in many cases, they're just not fit for purpose any longer. They need a more open, predictive model. They need the capacity to retrain expediently. Because if you think about what's been happening in healthcare over the last 12 months, normal rules have not applied. Things around emergency care, people have been fearful of going into hospitals. Elective waiting time performance has changed. Things have been put back and readmittance rates have changed as well. Things are drifting quicker than they would have done 12 months ago. And it's a problem if you're not cognizant around it and if you don't have the right tools in place to monitor and adjust. So I think these open predictive models are really key around that. And some of the announcements I saw at the event, I think really support everything that they're suffering from at the moment and the problems they're experiencing. So I think we've got some great benefits there.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, cross industries the last year has really um, rewritten the books on a lot of models. So, for example, one of the things we've been talking about in the Insight.Tech program has been supply chain issues. And of course, there have been all kinds of problems there, from shortage of toilet paper to ships getting stuck in the Suez Canal. I mean, it's just been wild, right? So, there, all of the sort of, let's say Excel-based, very simplistic approaches to supply chains have been really badly broken by all the chaos of the last year. And AI has been extremely helpful in helping companies cope with those chaotic changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that leads me to a question for you, Yazz. So, Intel is reporting some very impressive gains in performance in these sort of AI, deep learning, machine learning kinds of areas. They're talking about 1.5x faster across a suite of workloads, and just more broadly, a roughly 50% performance increase overall. So that's, I'm sure, going to have a pretty big impact for your customers. So where do you see the big wins in terms of how this performance is going to help your customers in things like, industrial and other types of IoT applications?
Sure. And I'm honestly quite tempted to say everywhere across the board for our customers. Because when we think about deep learning and machine learning, efficiency or that repeatable execution of those complex algorithms that learn, forecast, execute these tasks repeatedly at a rapid pace without issues is key. The reason really is the better, the faster predictions you can make, the better the business outcome. So when you say 1.5x faster or almost a 50% boost performance, that is truly monumental. As for where it will have the biggest impact in industrial or other IoT applications, I would really like to mention the fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0, as we call it, that will benefit greatly from this performance boost. You start thinking about smart factories, smart sensors, IoT devices collecting lots and lots of data. So you have a ton of these endpoints feeding into a system with Intel's third gen Xeon CPUs, and as Sally mentioned, with AI acceleration already caked into it. So it's truly a beautiful symphony. You're receiving a lot of this data using these complex algorithms to make accurate calculated decisions at record speeds. And one of the applications that jumps out immediately, um, think image recognition and analysis. Say you have a train going down the tracks carrying lots of precious heavy cargo. That train eventually has to stop for a manual inspection, which takes lots of time, lots of resources, simply disrupts the flow. So now you put the 4K cameras, for example, on the side of those tracks with a ruggedized system such as Trenton's latest BAM server using Intel's third gen Xeon CPUs. Now you are able to snap images of the train as it passes by, never stopping. And this image recognition and analysis can quickly scan, calculate, analyze, predict, and make decisions without stopping the train if there is no need. So Intel's latest CPUs can do this 1.5 times faster, or almost 50% faster. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, it is cool. I'm glad you mentioned this rugged mobile example because I think, that's one of the things that maybe wouldn't have been immediately obvious to everyone attending the launch event. You think about Xeon, you typically think about the data center, climate
Mm-hmm.
control, giant racks of servers. And that's certainly an important application for these parts, but they're also extraordinarily important for the sort of in the field edge computing applications that you're talking about there. And I
Correct.
think having this additional performance is really huge because there are lots of applications like the one you mentioned where you just need immense amounts of compute power at the edge to get the job done.
Correct. And it's honestly, you mentioned at the edge, and it's also at the tactical edge, so harsher environments even. And so for that capability to be present, whether you're in a climate controlled environment or at that edge, it's still, you get that same performance boost. So like I said, I'm tempted to say that the benefit will be seen everywhere, industrial and other IoT applications, simply because of that performance boost.
Yeah, and I would say even a lot of it comes down to scalability, right? I mean, this just kind of puts a higher ceiling on the performance that is available at the edge, which in some ways is an even bigger deal than the data center slash cloud, where you can always put another server rack in.
Correct.
That's not always so easy on your train or wherever it might be out there in the field.
Correct. Yep. Exactly.
So the other thing that really stood out to me were the security features, and yeah, as you were talking about how for your customers, this element of security is a pretty critical part of what they're doing. And
Mhm.
I would like to know more about what kind of security features your customers are asking for, and how the new features in Ice Lake might relate to that.
Sure. It's almost one of those, how much time do we have to talk about security? Because everywhere you look, that seems to be a major topic now, or a major, I would say, sector of concern within the IT world. So our customers are very concerned about it. As you mentioned, whether you're in the data center or at the edge, the security of those systems, it has to be top notch. And it's not just, we're not just talking software level concern anymore. We look at the system and the environment holistically. So this means where your components are sourced from, so an actively managed supply chain. What do these components provide? So hardware level security, firmware that's running on the hardware, and of course the software piece as well. We can call this, and I think a lot of people are referring to this now as confidential computing. We tend to refer to it as system hardening. But at the end of the day, our customers want to be protected from unwanted access to their data, to those sensitive pieces of information. And Intel security features such as TME, or total memory encryption, SGX, software guard extensions, or PFR, platform firmware resilience, are just some of those key features that are truly enhancing system wide security. honestly, when you just hear those three terms, I mentioned encryption on the memory, guarding the software, and protecting the firmware code. So that's just crazy good if you ask me. And you ask what our customers are asking about, exactly that. So that's why Trenton Systems is an Intel house. It plays well with our customers, our dedication to system hardening, and our determination to reduce the attack surface and thwart any potential attacks, and providing our customers with the most robust, most advanced cybersecure solution powered by Intel the market has seen. So I can tell you firsthand, our customers love that story. Why? It's true, it's tried, it's tested across some of the harshest environments, running mission critical applications across the globe. So when it comes to security, truly, I cannot stress enough, it is P1 for most of our customers at the moment. And having these features from Intel on this next gen platform is just critical to what we do and how we provide our servers to the world.
I'll tell you what, Yaz, if I ever hear from Intel that they need a security evangelist, I'll know who to suggest.
Please do.
You're hired.
Oh, nice. Wonderful. I love it.
So, Sally, I know you were also pretty impressed by the security features. Do you have anything to add to what Yaz said about those?
Yeah, I love Yaz's comments there. I couldn't agree more in the fact that security is front of mind. It doesn't matter if you're enterprise or SME. And we've seen a big acceleration in attacks, in malware. SME market, just a report I'm doing at the moment, actually has shown a 400% increase in vulnerability to cyber threats. So every aspect, it's front of mind. And so embedding this in by design, which is what we saw through some of the examples that Yazz was sharing just now, that breeds trust. It gives that confidence. So it's absolutely vital. I can't stress, I couldn't agree more strongly that this is such an advance forward. And for me, other things that came to mind specifically was a software guard extension, or SGX. So that's using hardware-based trusted execution environment, and it can isolate, it can help protect specific application code and also data in memory. And as Yazz was saying, to an extent, it's about this confidential computing and privacy preserving techniques. So I'm really excited about that. The benefits of data sharing, or basically not sharing the data itself, it's so critical. That healthcare example I gave earlier as one example of that is where we can get a lot of benefits. We've shown in the past that if you can enable that confidential computing, that safe data sharing, there are huge economic benefits from doing that. But beyond that as well, some work I'm doing with UNESCO, I can see some amazing benefits to be able to apply that in situ there. So I'm excited where that's going. I think I'll also mention about the acceleration as well, the Intel crypto acceleration, because that reduces the impact of full data encryption and it increases performance. So that's hugely important as well for encrypted sensitive workloads. So I'm really impressed where this is going. And I think the other thing I would mention as well, and I wrote about this in a recent blog, but there's a lot of support for community here. I love to see things that are supporting and enabling developers, reducing restrictions, enabling more time to be more productive and creative. I think we're doing that with some of the advancements we've seen here.
Excellent. And just one point of clarification. When you say SME, I assume you're talking about small to medium enterprise?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, got to check. I never know if it's Americans and Brits talk the same language almost.
It is.
Maybe we're talking about biscuits. Biscuits
SME,
versus
SMB.
Cookies. Is it a boot or a trunk? Who knows?
I'm glad you clarified that. Here I am thinking subject matter expert.
Yeah. Right. So, of course, we're really going to be able to scratch the surface in this conversation of all the new and improved features that were discussed at the event. But I do think it's worth spending at least a little bit more time talking about some of the other things that really stand out for IoT type of applications. So, Yazz, in particular, some of the things that stood out to me, and I think your customers would care a lot about, would be some of the I/O upgrades, like the upgraded PCIe. So can you tell me a little bit about what really stood out to you on that front?
Sure, and it's tough to pick just a few, but as you said, we'll have to condense for the purposes of this podcast. But we have an increased core count for a performance boost. So that to me would be kind of stands out immediately because, as you know, these different applications that we're thinking about in the future, they're just requiring more and more performance. And having an increased core count does just that. And as you mentioned, PCIe Gen 4 support. So one of our newest servers has 11 of these by 16 PCIe Gen 4 slots, and they are talking directly to the CPUs. And speaking of that, they are also supported by increased memory bandwidth. Memory capacity is at 6 terabytes per CPU. And now you think about our latest BAM server, it has 24 DDR4 drives that are talking to the latest Intel CPUs who are communicating to the PCIe Gen 4 slots. That increases system-wide performance. And Sally mentioned this a couple of times, AI acceleration already built in. I think she also touched on the crypto acceleration. The system supports Intel Optane Persistent Memory 200 series, which is the next-gen persistent memory, increases agility and access to more data that's closer to the CPU. Again, think speed here. And of course, as we mentioned before, the security enabled and reliability through the roof. So those are just a few that jump out at the moment. But I think to me, the list is truly endless as far as all of the benefits that our customers care about.
Totally agree. But I also have to point out that, this is all great, but you take some software to take advantage of these features. And, one small consideration there. And it was interesting to me to see some of the frameworks called out in this launch event. And I think, over the last couple of years, Intel has really been broadening its vision, not just thinking about itself as a chip company, but, putting more and more investment into software frameworks. And I think, particularly when we're thinking about the high performance, whether it's AI or other kind of workloads, the frameworks that they developed called OpenVINO and oneAPI are particularly important in actually enabling you to use these high performance features. So I'm curious how the folks there at Trenton are actually using these frameworks and how your customers are using these frameworks to take advantage of the next generation features.
Sure. I'm sure one of our software engineers would love to talk your head off about this. But I'll try to summarize. Our in-house software engineers use oneAPI, specifically the System Bring Up toolkit within it. So it's used with all new designs and helps around BIOS customization that our engineers tweak on behalf of our customers where or when needed. And that's a key differentiator even for Trenton Systems, and it helps our engineers work more efficiently. So the key takeaway here for me is Intel is building the hardware and the tools for customers, OEMs such as Trenton, and the very engineers using it. So it just goes to show how meticulous Intel really is when it comes to building quality product and dedicated to enabling engineers to get work done better, faster than yesterday. And so it really spans across that entire ecosystem from us as a manufacturer of these systems to the customers that we sell them to. You have this performance, security, and everything we've mentioned before, but you also now have a lot of these tools that enable you to do your job better, faster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, it's lovely to talk spec sheets and, geek out with the engineers. But at the end of the day, it's those real world benefits that matter, right? Can you more readily catch a defect or, increase the security and safety of your system or, whatever it might be. Those real world benefits are what actually matter. And
Yep.
and to that point, Sally, that was something that actually stood out to me about this launch. I agree. This was one of the best launches of a tech product that I've seen in quite some time, and I felt that way because there was so much emphasis on real world benefits. And I loved how Intel brought in all of its customers and partners. It wasn't just Intel sort of tooting its own horn, but people talking about what they're doing and the real world advances that are powering through this technology, including not least of which are the advances in doing things for the benefits of society and the environment and things like that. And so I'm curious what you think about this different sort of philosophical direction Intel is taking.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I loved it. I really, really did. I thought, in the keynote, the phrase new day was mentioned. And I thought that summed it up really, really well. And there were lots of different points to that. So there was a lot of listening to the community that was going on. And as you were saying there, showcasing real world projects, which I absolutely love to see. But there was integration, as we talked about just now, bringing together software, silicon platforms, packaging, process at scale manufacturing, and really showing how to tackle the problems that organizations are suffering from. So I love that. There was a focus on supporting customers, reducing complexity. I love the fact that we were talking about how to support, when we go into the performance stage of things. And so one other thing I noticed as well was there felt like there was a clear focus strategy change and really looking at how to build upon the performance that Intel's delivering as you move into deployment. So not just focusing on the next generation, but supporting what's happened and doing, continual updates, etc. as well. So I think that's supporting a lot of problems that people can have in the field. So it's great to see that as well. There was also a lot of complementary launches going on. So it felt like a real development across the portfolio, which I think is hugely important to give that adaptability and performance for various workloads. So it was great to see that. So it feels, again, more of a systems level solution approach. So I think that's very, very important to support organizations, support customers, reducing complexity, which is coming up again and again as one of the biggest challenging, particularly across distributed environments. So great to see that. And going back to Tech for Good, listening to community, there's a sustained commitment there. I believe wholeheartedly that leadership in technology goes beyond the tech. It's the people behind it. It's what you apply the tech for. And the fact that this is a continuation, back in April 2020, we had the Pandemic Response Technology Initiative that Intel launched. And that did an incredible job. Only a year later, we have this new approach with Intel Rise Technology Initiative. So we're seeing that it's not a one-off, it's not an add-on, it's truly embedded and is supporting projects. And again, it's supporting collaborations as well. It's bringing people together, it's co-creating solutions, bringing technology and talent. And there was that takeaway quote at the end, technology is magic. I could not agree more. It was really inspirational. And that's what I just love to see. And it just kind of changes the narrative on what we can do with technology. So I was hugely impressed by that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, I'd really love to hear, you are an Intel customer. Like if you're seeing any difference in the experience in working with Intel, and also, if you find yourself thinking about the technology landscape a little bit differently these days, and if so, how you're thinking about things.
Of course, certainly. And I do also would like to say that the launch was one of the best things I've seen. Being the marketing guy, I geeked out all over it. I love the special effects and the content within it. And speaking of changes, that alone shows the dedication right out the gate that Intel wants to differentiate themselves and wants to grow as a company. So as an Intel partner, we get to stand shoulder to shoulder with Intel in developing, testing, and perfecting these next-gen technologies for our collective customer base. So Intel, over the years, has invested so much that it seems to just have doubled down on this strategy to improve the products, services, processes, and procedures, and the Intel brand to adhere to the greater good of all. It truly feels that the mission has become a betterment of all rather than a company. And so Intel is also determined to make their partner ecosystem be a collaborator in tomorrow's technologies. And Trenton Systems is truly honored to be part of this mission. As I've stated before, we've been an Intel house since inception in the late 80s. And since then, we've come a long way. But the quality of the product has only improved. And with it, the trust from partners as well as customers. We're currently working on the 6th early access program to collaborate with Intel on the next gen technologies. And we're truly excited to be part of that story and effort and look forward to supporting our customers with Intel's latest and greatest for generations to come.
Wonderful. Well, so speaking of generations to come, I'd like to wrap up, Sally, with a question to you about, given everything we've talked about, the AI, the security, the tech for good, and so on, what are some of the key trends we might want to keep an eye on as we're moving forward?
Absolutely. And I love that summary from Yazz just now. I love that. It was fantastic to hear. I think for me, number one, just reflecting on the tech for good aspect for a minute, the rise of social business. I thought there was a huge statement around that and, embedding impact, embedding community, embedding collaboration at the very heart of digital transformation. So not on the periphery. That came to the fore. So very much kind of a shared values model of business. It was great to see that. In terms of tech trends, I think we're seeing the continued confluence basically across four key areas. So we have around hybrid cloud, AI, as we've talked about in depth today, being infused more into the edge, network and cloud, 5G deployments. We're seeing also these heightened demands of 5G, an area we're working a lot, really pushing these compute resources closer to where data is created and where it's consumed. So it's really about this integration, this confluence of these trends going forward. And I think they were going to have a huge escalation across those areas, particularly with 5G becoming more and more adopted over the coming months. So I think I'm excited to see where that's going. And again, this flexibility around performance, which has been very heart of the event, performance made flexible is really the key words around that, is going to be hugely important going forward as these trends literally continue. Other areas to look at, data center of the future, looking incredibly different, more distributed location, size, and also built on both private and public cloud computing. Storage and memory increasingly disaggregated. Security, as we've already seen, being architected continually at the chip level and continually enhanced. And this increased flexibility and this bringing together, as I was talking about in terms of strategy across hardware, software, this integration, and obviously application and services as well. So yeah, I'm really excited about where we're going here, but the future is definitely integrated.
Wonderful. Well, that just leaves me to say thank you, Sally, for joining us.
My pleasure. Love to speak to you both.
And thank you, Yazz, as well. Really appreciate your time.
Certainly. Thank you.
And of course, thanks to our listeners for joining us. And you can keep up with the latest from Trenton Systems by following them on Twitter. You will not be surprised, at Trenton Systems. And you can find Dr. Sally Eaves at, again, no big shocker here, at Sally Eaves. That's SALLYEAVES. And if you enjoyed listening, please support us by subscribing and rating us on your favorite podcast app. This has been the IoT Chat. We'll be back next time with more ideas from industry leaders at the forefront of IoT design.